approached writing Luther with really a sense of terror and dread and sleeplessness and shaky hands. What the BBC asked me to do was to create an iconic police officer, an iconic detective. The roads of history are littered with the corpses of iconic detectives past, and finding something new and vital and never told before was quite a difficult thing to ask.
Luther is Neil Cross's first series, and as such it's a huge thing for him because he's writing all 6 episodes. He's written novels before and he's written episodes of Spooks before, but this is a mammoth undertaking.
This is absolutely his creation and his voice, and I think that's what's so exciting about Luther the series is it has an authored feel to it, and I think that's something that we don't often see on British television.
I got the idea for Luther because I've spent my lifetime watching and reading detective fiction. Now, in crime fiction there are 2 broad genres. One is the mystery genre, the puzzle-solving genre, and that's where tends to be a genius detective, a lone maverick or an eccentric. He puts together puzzles, solves mysteries through the accumulation of clues that only he or she can see. And this is the tradition really best exemplified by people like Sherlock Holmes or Miss Marple. The second tradition involves a much more morally committed, much more beaten and bruised central heroic figure, best exemplified by Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe. What I've never seen was a character who exemplified both of these primary traits, a character who was as eccentric and as brilliant as Sherlock Holmes, but as morally dangerous as Philip Marlowe.
What you're doing is wrong.
Yeah, I know.
Why do it then?
Because it's right. Luther's sort of a modern spin on sort of the maverick detective. The truth sits in a jigsaw somewhere and he wants to find it. That's what his driving passion is. But somehow, someway, he always gets it.
He's a really brilliant and inspiring thinker, you know, a real original thinker. And
he's got proper skepticism and just the right amount of cynicism even for things. He sees things how they are. It keeps him working.
What's very compelling about him as a human being is that he's caught in the grip of his own emotions. He's got a great brain, but he leads with his heart.
He's a modern hero, John Luther, and a real mess. A dangerous character, and an alpha male, and everybody else has to, you know, both his colleagues, his boss, everybody else has to, in the end, try and fit in around him.
Stay away! Do you understand? Stay away from me! Stay away from my life! Stay a fucking way! Do you hear me?
You as an audience will sit there and go, oh, I'm not sure if he should be doing that. Should he be planting evidence or not? Should he be breaking the law to get there? I think that puts us as an audience in a better position to watch this.
The style that Neil writes in is quite heightened. It's not realism. The characters are all slightly theatrical and everything is pushed to the extreme. John Luther is not going to deal with 6 psychopaths in the space of 3 months. Do you know what I mean? It's very extreme and everything's pushed to the edges of it. So it's actually more theatrical than you would get in normal TV dramas, I think. And the characters are slightly bigger than life in that respect.
Neil was always most intrigued and most in love with the characters and seeing how they interact, rather than how exactly we caught the villain.
One doesn't necessarily have to worry about every beat of authenticity in the way that one might, for example, in a show like The Wire.
The thing with Luther, it's not a police procedural, and so what Neil's always said when people have said, oh, but somebody wouldn't actually do that, is he's right. He's, you know, working within Luther world, and it's quite a heightened world, and what you need to feel is that you're invested in what he's doing because he's doing it for right.
Graham knows we're on to him, all right? And he'll try and kill as many as he can before we catch him. If I have to terrify his wife to stop that happening, I can live with that.
Oh, that's make John Luther gentleman of the parish.
The format of the show, Luther, really evolved outwards from the character. It seemed to me the best way for us really to engage with him and to see his world through his eyes was to see the moral outrages that he deals with in order to understand the cost that these crimes have on him. To that end, I took a leaf from Detective Columbo's book and made the story not a whodunit but a how catch him.
We haven't seen this style of storytelling, the sort of Columbo style of storytelling, for a while, so it feels pretty fresh now.
The way the drama's set up, where you do realise who the criminal is in the first few pages, I think that allows you as an intelligent member of the audience to sort of make up your own conclusions about how Luther should go about doing it. If you consider the procedure is right and Luther doing his own thing is wrong, then where do you sit as an audience knowing who the killer is already? What do you think Luther should do or shouldn't be doing in order to get the criminal?
It just sort of makes it more about the chase, doesn't it? And I think, no, for me, surely the chase is better, isn't it? It's like, you know, you order a pizza or a Chinese and it's, I'm waiting for it, I'm hungry, I'm starving, and that's brilliant. They build, oh, when's it coming, and then when it gets here, you eat it. Oh, I feel a bit sick now, so no, the chase is a bit better, isn't it? And it also stops those, you know, like any Scooby-Doo moments or anything where it's going to be like, oh, it was there all along, but she was fat and the bloke.
There was a shooter, as far as we can establish. He turned the corner into the street down here, just walked right up and shot her.
Point blank.
In the abdomen. This isn't right.
I've just read Luther, I couldn't put it down. Oh, don't.
I read the scripts on one summer's day on Highbury Fields and thought, God, I have to do this.
It was a page turner for me, you know. I'd kept reading it, couldn't put it down. It was more and more sort of involved into the story as you turn the page.
It was dark, interesting, the characters were really well defined.
It reminded me of Silence of the Lambs, but what this did was turned it on its head by having a female psychopath interacting with the male police detective.
Each one was surprising, each one almost got more and more visceral.
It was brilliant at pushing a story along without it feeling expositional.
I thought it was a real sort of different type of character.
It's not romanticised, you know, and God knows we all love romance.
You don't get many female roles which are, you know, are evil in that sense, and so I was really intrigued by it and thought it was a wonderful piece that you could have a lot of fun with.
It was just so immediately arresting, a really bold and vibrant piece of writing.
Katie, the producer, had gone round to all the agents and she rang me up and said, hey, Idris Elba's agents just said he would love to do something in this country, what do you think? And it was kind of like a breathtaking moment because we both went, what? You know, this is really exciting, this is what we've been looking for.
We've always seen detectives that have, you know, sort of issues and so on and so forth, but there was something about the passion of Luther that inspired me. I was really impressed with Neil Cross's sort of point of view. He doesn't make any sort of excuses, you know, his mind is quite grotesque. So these characters in these episodes are equally grotesque.
What Idris brought so beautifully was that huge intellect, but also you can see his emotions very clearly, and I think that makes your heart go out to him.
Because he's such an emotional and soulful and sensitive guy, things which were written as flashes of pure intellectual genius suddenly come across as blind hunches. And so when people like Teller are saying to Luther, where is this coming from? This is completely illogical and unreasonable. You're actually inclined to agree with them.
There was no screams, no sign of any altercation. That's not it.
Trusted, he knows them, maybe.
He can't have known all four of them. No, he didn't. But they trusted him. They trusted him. I think we're looking for a taxi driver.
Zoe, Alice and Teller are based on the 3 stages of womanhood. This is very, very sort of ancient storytelling, so shouldn't be taken literally. But you have the Virgin, who is Alice, and you see the Virgin a lot in fairy tales. And she is fresh in life and looking for new experiences the whole time. The second stage is the mother, and that's Zoe. And the mother is all about nurturing. And then the third is, Saskia shouldn't take this personally, but it is called the crone. But it means the woman who has been through those earlier 2 stages and has now got wisdom. And Neil was very keen to sort of loosely base these 3 women on these different aspects of womanhood, and then they should circle Luther.
They're played by 3 astonishingly strong actresses, and he's sort of torn between all 3 of them. And you kind of feel for this guy because he is kind of sometimes just spaced out, and he's trying to do his job, and he's got these women making these huge demands on him, and then you can just see on Idris's face this kind of, Christ, now what do I do? It's been quite interesting to see Idris playing against these really strong actresses.
Are you afraid of me?
Yes.
Why?
You know why?
Do you want me to leave you alone?
Yes, I do.
Then answer my question.
Why?
To help with my investigation.
Casting Alice was key to this whole drama coming together. And we couldn't have gotten a better Alice, I don't think. We couldn't have gotten someone so dedicated to the part like Ruth is. Even some of the most bizarre and abstract stuff that she has to say as Alice can bring a real chilling reality to it.
No, it's true. I'm a bit like that. A bit random. Slightly kooky.
Kooky?
Absolutely.
I think there are quite a few ways you could probably play Alice. You know, she's a physicist, so you could go down the route of her being quite geeky. And originally, that's how some of us thought it might go. But, I don't know, I had an idea that she was almost too perfect. She was untouchable. She was someone that you'd see, you'd be struck by her because she was quite striking, or very striking, but you'd never see her again. So we moved very quickly away from mousy Alice, it could have been, to a very strong, strident, powerful, frightening in that way, but she's also sexy.
There's a great irony that a man who seeks to uphold the law should find his strongest ally in a woman who he knows to be a killer.
Everyone needs to be fascinated with something or somebody, and I think Alice is Luther's fascination. And his imagination, I think.
Is she or isn't she part of Luther's imagination? Is she real? Is she not real? Is she an apparition? Is she the devil? There's a scene of me walking around him where I'm sort of toying with him, and then we did it without me being there. So, as if he was talking to himself. I mean, I was still doing the lines off camera.
I ain't that worried that I might sneak in and finish the job.
Well, you might be mad, but you're not stupid.
She has never had anyone that's challenged her intellectually or sexually or anything. She's always been in control. She's always been dominant. You hope the audience at one point want them to get it together. That's like, you know, which is weird because it's a psychopath and a policeman. You think shouldn't really happen.
Is the sex good?
Ugh. It's not about the sex.
It's always about the sex. You enjoy sex with him.
Y tus trailers. Visita mi canal.
Just goes round and round in my head like a train.
The trouble with you, the train in your head never stops. Zoe is passionately in love and has been in love with John Luther. She's become overwhelmed by how much his job means to him. It is everything to him, and she feels like she's been sidelined and actually she's had enough.
Luther's dug himself deeper into his work because and there's been something missing from their relationship for a long time.
So what do you do in life? How do people cope in relationships when actually life is getting in the way and his job is more important to him than their relationship at the moment, so she's had to move on? That's life, that's reality. And she's found someone who's more stable and who she loves genuinely, and I think that's really exciting to play because there's dilemma.
It feels to me Zoe is very much the heart and Alice is the head, and one without the other leaves him at a loss, and he needs both.
I'm really excited about the fact that in the 5th episode I get killed because you don't expect it.
Killing characters that we know or love when you don't expect it is a formula that hasn't been successful before. But now I think what it does is give audiences a sense of reality. You never know when it's your time to go, you know what I mean?
It always makes things unpredictable. You're never safe watching a British drama.
You examine the history of Luther's reactions and say to yourself, oh shit, what's he gonna do now?
Saskia, I think, sort of individuated a really tough part. The part of the boss in cop dramas, and she kind of brings a sort of willfulness and also a humour, a quirkiness. She really wanted to play the woman as opposed to the boss.
Ian, we've got a special forces nut job out there gunning down uniforms, and this phone is our sole lead, and we don't ignore leads. So all we can do is go in hard and noisy, and as ready as is humanly possible to be. We let tactical do their job, and when it's done, we buy them a drink and tell them their biceps are sexy. Done? Yeah.
Anything that you can find to trick your mind into being a human being and not just playing a policeman. So you have to be careful you don't start playing stereotypes, although these are archetypal characters.
There's scenes between her and Luther that really sing because of the way that she's brought that character to life. You look at her on screen and you think, I actually really believe now that this man can function in this department.
His relationship with Teller, being his boss, and also the wind under his sails, it's like, go. You know, I understand you for who you are and I understand how your mind works, but yet still I have to uphold the procedure that you are not going to.
They're both a little bit off the wall, and I think the more bizarre he becomes, the more sort of she can counter him each time.
He's driven by a fear that he might be on the devil's side, and his relationship with Taylor helps to throw that into sharp focus.
You want to know the real tragedy about marriage?
No thanks.
Women always think men will change, but they don't. Men think women won't change, but they do.
She makes some massive mistakes, and that's another thing I like about her. She's not as all-knowing as I perhaps like her to be. She's very narrow-minded about certain things. She has a very particular vision, and I think that lets her down.
Luther responds differently to each of these women, and each of them want something from him. They all lecture him and tell him how he should change more and be different. And what's wonderful is none of them succeed, and he remains the same.
Luther is every man at one level because, you know, he has needs and he has, you know, strong emotions, but he's also trying to do his bloody job. You know, and how many men have that in their lives? They're just trying to get on and do stuff, and, you know, they don't need women kind of telling them all the other stuff that needs to go on. So I think it's kind of almost a portrayal of, you know, that dilemma that modern man has, is they're supposed to be everything to everyone, and it's not easy, and he doesn't find it easy, and I think you feel for that.
I need coffee. Do you want some?
Tea.
Tea. Builders? Is it John? Mark tries his best to be and to represent that bit of calm he thinks that she needs. You can't hate Luther, he hardly knows him. It's a test of him as a male, as a man, and one that Mark North perhaps is not so suited to.
Oh, come on! We're not interrogating your masculinity here.
Yeah, well, we don't have to worry about that, do we? I'm secure enough to weather any comparison you care to make with your ex-husband.
Of course you are.
I think in the end what redeems Mark North, certainly in the eyes of Luther, is that he's big enough to understand the dilemma that Zoe is in. This is real, it's real life.
You should make a list of the reasons why you married him, and then make another list of the reasons why you left him, and then see if the two lists don't overlap.
It would be great if our affections were so, as we know, were so clear-cut, our relationships were so defined, the boundaries were so neat, that life was easy. Life isn't easy. Mark North does something impressive, even in the eyes of John Luther. He cedes, he understands, he allows her to do what she wants, because he loves her. And in the end, that's all there is.
Do you have any sexual fantasies?
What? Yeah, not that I'm going to tell you about.
Does the reality ever live up to the fantasy?
I am... well... No, not really.
It can't, can it?
Warren Brown playing Ripley, he's not going to like me saying this, but he is Luther's Robin, me being Batman, of course.
Ripley's character is everything by the book and respect for the rules, and Luther sort of hasn't got that. But ultimately, they're both after the same goal. They're both trying to nail the baddie. Nail the baddie, that's cheeseball, isn't it?
Warren is a great actor and also brings a sort of fresh-faced, unburdened detective storyline, energy.
He's not just young, wet behind the ears you know, novice, he's got to have qualities that Luther will look at him and think, one day you'll make a great police officer, you're worth me investing in.
Luther sort of admires some of Justin's qualities, you know, the fact that he doesn't have any biases and he won't just judge when he first gets to a scene. It's sort of the goodness in him that Luther thinks, see, you know, people can be, it's not all about, you know, there's an ulterior motive or people have got a dark side. He is good and he's got morals and he wants to do the job to the best of his ability, and, you know, if he can help someone, he'll help someone and not let anybody down.
I said nothing and I won't say anything. But you can't go on like this. You just can't.
Oh. Where are you going? Do you ever get a song stuck in your head and it just keeps going round and round and round?
To Pal, China in Your Hands. Oh, deep strangeness, that song. High weirdness.
I kind of likened reading Luther to Othello and Iago. Classic betrayal story, you know? We don't overplay it in this. We don't overplay the friendship, and we don't overplay the betrayal, but it's there.
They're old mates, and it's a very male, blokey relationship. They don't sit around and having heart-to-hearts. He's a good supportive friend, really.
And the thing about friends is sometimes you'll meet two people and they're like, we're best friends. And sometimes you'll see similarities in them. Sometimes you won't, which will make you go, I wonder why they're best friends. And I think we are the latter.
They're both driven to try and catch these people doing these awful things. They have their own means for doing it, and I think they understand that, well, sometimes you might cross a line here and you might cross a line there. The cause ultimately is good.
Do you not worry you're on the devil's side without even knowing it?
No. Having to investigate crimes like this on a weekly basis is tough work. The emotional repercussions of having to deal with these kind of crimes is enormous. I'm glad I only have to act this, because if this was my job, I don't think I'd be up to it. It's tough.
We have seen a lot of maverick cops, and you have to earn your space in the world, and we did genuinely believe that this guy had not been seen before, and it felt really necessary that we had to present him in a way that hadn't been seen before.
I asked the BBC to send me every single crime drama that had been made in the last 15 years, and then this amount of discs turned up and I sort of swallowed and thought, oh God, I'm going to have to watch them all now. We began to feel that there was a tendency to just make a box, and the colours inside that box didn't make you feel like it was actually connected to the real world. And from there it sort of gave birth to this.
The vision for the show is you've got the staff of the Serious Crime Unit in the centre office here. At this end, you've got Teller's office, who's the Chief Inspector. She sits in here and she overlooks the Serious Crime Unit. And in the far end, over that way, you've got Luther's office and Reed's office.
The colour palette is generally quite muted and quite timeless.
The colour scheme is based on a neutral colour scheme, where you'll have a small amount of very strong colour in the palette. The rest of the colours will come from greys, but they'll be highlighted by the stronger colour.
And you'll see there's some nice, some little kicks of red, such as like, you know, the kind of alarm systems and the fire extinguishers. They kind of zing out, and, you know, in their own way.
That's why we went for the bright red hair as well of my character, because it created the colour palette that there's sort of red, the lips, the hair, and every now and then there's bits of red around. This
office is a blue-grey, Luther's office is a brown-grey, and the central office is a green-grey. We chose a blue-grey because she's a Chief Inspector. We thought that would be the most policey colour to choose, but this is the only instance you'll find blue in this set.
The exterior for Hobbs Lane, which is a beautiful 50s building in Southwark, it's directly next door to IBM, which is a great bit of sort of 70s concrete. So we've tried to tie that in a little bit with this design. You've got a bit of the Victorian brewery building, you've got these kind of 50s elements which we've put into the panelling, and there's some of this sort of 70s harsh concrete in, for example, the interview room.
We've chosen a style of 50s architecture predominantly for Hobbs Lane and for a few of the other locations, including the colour palette that was used in 50s architecture, which again is muted and ties in with the interiors.
We wanted to, both with composition and lighting and framing, show who he is and how he thinks. I think particularly what we felt was that we're dealing with a thriller, and we're dealing with this man's way of looking at the world and the way his mind works, and that we wanted to get a little bit of tension into it for the thriller aspect, but we also wanted to have this slightly skewed worldview that Luther has.
Tráilers.
And we arrived
Visita
at
mi
this,
canal.
what's become a bit of a Luther framing, lots of headroom and short-siding frames, and people pop right down in the bottom corners of frames.
I think the style is a big part of, you know, the way Luther's mind thinks. You know, it's slightly off kilter.
Actually invites you to consider what's going on inside their head. It's almost like the equivalent of the space where the thought bubble goes in the cartoon.
You as a viewer can sit and watch what you want. You can watch Luther, but then you can watch what's going on behind.
The reflections and the framing are very important, and we've used all sorts of different styles and types of glass, where you can see through glass, you can see into glass, you can reflect from glass, and it alters the framing considerably. Here we have an example of the glass and the reflections that we're using. In Teller's office, you can shoot through this window, you can reflect the office behind you at the same time while you're looking at Teller.
It's great to be able to sit behind Teller's head and shoot all the way through, to go through all the glass division panels, and you see people movement behind that, layers of light, layers of texture.
Luther sees the world in its lines, quite graphically. So we were always looking for graphic lines in our compositions and shapes, and I think you can see it in the finished films.
I remember very early on banning the word gritty, because everyone just, you know, they read the content and they go, oh, it's very dark, it's very gritty, and it's like, no, it can't be gritty, it's got to be beautiful. It's got to be luscious. It's got to be something you want to watch, rather than you feel terribly depressed about it.
This is about moral codes.
Change state of play.
I think Luther's character is particularly well defined and has the potential to be iconic.
My character is a little less British and more superhero than normal, I think. He never changes his clothes. He's like an action hero from start to finish.
He's a hero, and I don't find that there are many heroes around.
He's that rare thing, a true original in the world of maverick cops, which is a very overcrowded world, and he really stands out.